7 myths about our tabletop gaming hobby, and reasons why you should be enjoying this wonderful aspect of our complete, total gaming hobby. Come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to our wonderful tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is 7 reasons why you should be looking into tabletop gaming itself. Now, our wonderful hobby has always been kind of forked into 3 different avenues when you look at our tabletop gaming hobby itself. You have the traditional board games, such as all these things you see behind me. You have your role-playing games, which is another aspect of gaming that people do greatly enjoy, and then you have your tabletop gaming hobby itself, which is the miniature gaming games that use much more of a different aspect. And all 3 of these aspects of a wonderful gaming hobby do seem to fork off of each other, and you do see that people generally don't like to cross the stream. It's almost like a bad episode of Ghostbusters where they're trying to take out the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and somebody yells, "Don't cross the streams," except somebody's yelling, "Don't cross the gameplay." But what I'm going to present here are 7 great reasons and breaking down some of those barriers to help you maybe enjoy an aspect of our hobby that you may not be considering. So, if you enjoy this video, if you enjoy the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon, patreon.com/OTSBGR. This channel is 100% sponsor free. I operate without the money given to me by sponsors or people supporting the channel. So help keep media free by thinking about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just $1 in the tip jar is a great way to say thanks. You also feel free to email me at off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. Do my best to answer those emails. Like and subscribe. That's another great way to help support the channel. Just like and subscribe. Click those buttons down below. It's a great way to show that you enjoy the channel. Now let's get on to our topic with 7 myths about the board gaming hobby and the tabletop gaming hobby itself. Myth number 1 about tabletop gaming hobby, painting itself. Now, so many times people are shying away from tabletop miniatures gaming because of the strong stigma that you have to paint your games. Well, this is what I like to refer to as the Games Workshop effect, because you do not have to paint your games. They're not going to be ninjas who are going to jump through your door, kick open your windows, fly down from the roof, and come and attack you if you play your games without painted miniatures. Trust me, it's not going to happen. I actually tested it just to make sure, because I wanted to make sure this video is 100% factual. Just checking. I had to be sure. Anyways, this is something that is a huge myth and basically a bold-faced lie. Games Workshop itself is a company that sells miniatures. Games Workshop is a company that sells paints. How do you keep the profits out there? Well, by making sure everybody believes that you need to be purchasing both these things, the miniatures and the paints. You don't have to do this. You can play this wonderful hobby just by you looking at gray plastic on the tabletop. I'm guilty of doing it many times myself. There's been many games where I went out there and bought some awesome miniatures that I thought would be absolutely fantastic for a game I was playing. Any one of the games I've been playing, such as Rangers of Shadow Deep, I picked up some really cool miniatures. I'm like going, I'm playing the game, whether my miniatures are painted or not. And the ninjas be darned, they're not going to break through my window because I'm going to enjoy this hobby any way that I want to. But this is a strong stigma that it really needs to go away, because you can enjoy these games and this hobby so fantastically just by looking at the gray plastic. Now, if you want to take your gaming to the next level, you can definitely go out there and paint your miniatures. And painting your miniatures is not as difficult or as challenging as many people would have you leave to believe. Now, yes, we've all painted or tried to paint our miniatures before, and we've sat down, painted a miniature and said, wow, that's a globular, blobby mess of, dear God, was this a 4-year-old who painted this? And yeah, that may happen, but you can go out there and educate yourself. There are so many absolutely fantastic painting channels out there that could help you improve your painting. And I can guarantee you that if you want to paint and if you put forward the effort to learn the skill, maybe in a week you can go ahead and have some miniatures that are definitely very much able to be called tabletop quality. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, well, if there's so many great resources to go out there and learn how to painting, where can I find these resources? Well, I'll just call out just a couple that I can mention just off the top of my head right here. And I'll even leave links to these channels down below. But the first one I'm going to recommend is NJM, or Not Just Mecha. Now, this is a wonderful, extremely exuberant painter. This guy does an absolutely fantastic job. And trust me when I say this guy is Golden Demon level of painting. but he breaks it down into a way that can help you see how to paint your miniatures just in very easy, simple steps. And he's great for showing you tricks and tips and, dare I say it, wonderful little cheats to help you go ahead and get your miniatures out there to a great standard, just to tabletop standard, just with the simplest of effort and some wonderful, great cheats. Another great one that I love to mention is going to be Goobertown Miniatures. Now, Goobertown is a scientist and he takes a very scientific approach, but one of the things that I absolutely love about this guy and his channel is how he makes painting miniatures simple. There's been so many times where I needed some inspiration for painting some miniatures. I've gone directly to Goobertown Miniatures because his inspiration is he just breaks it down so darn simply. It's almost like watching Bob Ross. If Bob Ross was still alive and a miniature painter, he would be Goobertown Miniatures, because that is the vibe I get from watching these channels. Very simple things where he breaks it down and tells you to enjoy the art of painting, taking the, dare I say it, the chill of painting and showing you how to make it so darn easy. From base coats to counting up the layers and even doing various different, very simple tricks, even using washes, and he even teaches how to make some homemade washes if you're looking at doing this on a budget. And finally, just because I don't want this video to go for hours and hours, me talking about all these other YouTube channels that you can very easily just track down for yourself, I'm going to go ahead and mention Ninjon, who is a ninja when it comes to using a paintbrush. No, I just been wanting to say that for the longest time. But Ninjon is an absolute fantastic painter. This guy is another what I like to refer to as a golden demon level of painter. He has done an absolute fantastic job, and I think he actually has won a golden demon, or at least something along those lines, because he does an absolute brilliant job. But if you get into the painting hobby and you enjoy it as much as I think you might do so, this is something I'm going to suggest you go look forward to bring your painting up to the next level, because he does an absolute fantastic job. Now, I'm going to warn you that this is advanced level painting when you're checking out Ninjon. Now, don't be scared away. He does offer some wonderful tips for beginning painters, but if you stick around with this channel and search his YouTube history, of all the videos he has uploaded, he has brought out some absolutely fantastic painting miniature videos where he takes it down, where he's got the magnifying lens glasses and he's painting the miniatures to the utmost detail. And you're going, wow, he painted the eyebrows on there. I'm never going to do that. Never in a million years, because I'm playing tabletop games. I'm not trying to win competitions, but that is going to be Ninjon. Now, if you just want to get my advice on how to do this painting thing, though, I'll tell you some quick, cheap, easy ways to go ahead and do some tabletop quality miniatures that I use for myself, because I'm not a professional painter. I'm a tabletop gamer. I want to get my games on the table, not sit there for 8 hours on the minutest detail of painting the gun barrel and drilling out the gun barrel, because that is way, way, way beyond of anything I will ever do when it comes to painting miniatures. But there's multiple different ways that you can go out there and paint your miniatures so darn simplistically easy. You know that extra special sun drop method that a lot of people pay extra money for? It's the dip method. You're paying about 50 bucks for the dip method. Go ahead and look it up. If you want to know how to paint your miniatures super darn easily, check out the dip method. It's literally, sun drop is dip plus dry brushing. That's all it is. Don't be fooled. Additionally, you can go out there and base coat your paints with a white paint, a gray paint, or a black paint, and use what is called the slappy choppy method, or where the heck they're calling it these days. Basically, the slap chop method is a method that was stolen from about 400 years ago, given a very goofy YouTube name to make it stand out and be very much in the forefront. And basically, the idea is just using low lights on top of a dark base coat and then painting over those colors to get a very nice, good coloring for a tabletop quality on miniatures. These are very easy ways and methods to go ahead and paint miniatures, so you don't need to be intimidated by the concept of painting. And again, I want to emphasize what I said in the beginning. You don't have to paint your miniatures. That something's been sold to you by companies such as Games Workshop, who just want to make another penny on a dime. I don't begrudge them. They're businesses, but they're trying to make you think that you have to paint your miniatures because they want to sell you those paints. Let's move on. Myth number 2. The Rulebook revision fiasco. Now, this is one that I am really feeling self-conscious for defending, because Games Workshop is about to bring out the 10th, yes, I'm not exaggerating, the 10th edition of Warhammer 40K. So this is absolutely a fantastic reason to say, you know, I'm not touching tabletop games, because I know I'm going to play this game, and next year there's going to be a new edition. And there's going to be another new edition. There's going to be another new edition. Then all my miniatures I need to replace because all those editions are wiped out. And then those armies are useless. And then, yeah, no, it's an ever-ending spiral. And you're not completely wrong. Unless you realize that Games Workshop is not the only company in town. There are so many absolutely fantastic tabletop miniature game companies out there that put out games that are absolutely great, and they only see 1 or 2 editions. Now, if you're going to balk at 2 editions, I'm going to go ahead and look at you and say, look at your shelf, look at your 1st and 2nd edition of Dominion, look at your 1st and 2nd edition of, no, I'm not going down the rabbit trail, but we all know that even the board gaming hobby does come up with multiple editions of games sometimes, and they do change the rules just enough to kind of force you to buy the 2nd edition of the game. Well, if you can accept that, you can accept that some tabletop games also do that in the same amount. Let's go ahead and check out companies such as Osprey. Osprey is probably one of my top tier game companies when I'm talking about tabletop miniature games and companies that bring out the styles of games. They bring out so many great games that maybe only see 1 or 2 editions, and usually the 2nd edition is a primo edition of the game that is absolutely fantastic, and you don't need another edition of the game. Monolith is another game company that does the exact same thing. I can mention so many games that fit this criteria that only have 1 or 2 editions, and the great thing about these editions is they're PDFs. If another edition of the game comes out, you're not forced to buy another entire $150 version of the board game, $80, $100 version of the board game. You just go over to a company such as Drive-Thru RPG or something like that, and go ahead and pay $10, $15, or maybe $25 for another PDF for the 2nd edition of the game. Check out Rangers of Shadow Deep. Check out 5 Leagues from the Borderlands. Check out 5 Parsecs. Check out A Billion Suns. All these games are absolutely fantastic tabletop games that give you a wonderful style gameplay, and they give you a wonderful style gameplay in only 1 or 2 editions. So you can go ahead and take this myth and throw it in the trash, because unless you're following the Games Workshop train, there pretty much is only 1 or 2 editions of every single game, unless you're going with the Games Workshop. And welcome in 40K, 10th edition, coming out very, very soon. I'm trying to talk myself out of buying it. Tried really, really hard to talk myself out of it. But the box has Tyranids. I love the Tyranids. Hook, line, and sinker all over again. Myth number 3, the need for tons and tons and tons and tons of miniatures. You know, it feels like I'm picking on Games Workshop, and kind of am, because Games Workshop is kind of the juggernaut of the industry, and they create a lot of myths, and they were kind of the inspiration for this list in and of itself. But there is this myth in the industry that to play a tabletop game, you need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on miniatures just for your side, just for your army. And if you want your friends to play the games, they also need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on their army to bring up to the table. And then when the new edition comes out, oh wait, we're going back to myth number 2. Let's not go down that rabbit trail, because that's definitely not what we want to do here. But there is a strong myth that you need to buy thousands of dollars of miniatures. And I'm going to say it's a myth. There are so many absolutely fantastic games. Even Games Workshop makes a couple of them that actually play with a very small model count. Since I've been picking on Games Workshop so much in this video, I'll go ahead and throw one out there. Warcry, low model count. You can go ahead and look at Kill Team, low model count. Now let's go ahead and walk away from Games Workshop here just for a second, because there's already games I've already mentioned that also use a very small model count. You have Rangers of Shadow Deep, you have Shadowgrave, you have, I'm sorry, not Shadowgrave, Frostgrave. Hey, that's what happens when you combine 2 games. I wonder what happened if Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadow Deep combined into 1 game. The possibilities are almost endless there. But there are so many of these games that work with a very small model count, and they are very, very enjoyable. Matter of fact, many of these games you can play just with the board games that you already own right now. So you don't even need to go out there and buy more miniatures. If you own Descent, 1st edition, 2nd edition, 1st edition, the best edition, 2nd edition, an okay edition, and the 3rd edition, which is, I can't even bring the heart to do a video on that game because I know I'm going to tear it down so badly. But if you own these games, you can use those miniatures just out of that box to play some of these games I've already mentioned. You want to play Rangers of the Shadow Deep? Yeah, your box of Descent miniatures will allow you to do it. You want to play Frostgrave? Same deal. If you want to play 5 Leagues from the Borderlands? Yep, you guessed it, same deal. All these games would just require you to go out there and buy a PDF and use what you already own to enjoy some really great tabletop gaming. And not only that, it's going to bring some more life and breathe more life in the board games that might be collecting dust in your collection right now. Myth number 4, price. Now again, price is a really strong concern when we're trying to enjoy our hobby. We have many games in our hobby that can get very, very expensive, and the dollar bills do start stacking up after a while. But you don't have to buy the best and the best of the best when it comes to playing these games. You don't have to go out there and buy a box. Oh my gosh, poor Games Workshop. If they see this video, they're going to hunt me down to the ends of the earth. Good thing I don't have sponsors I need to keep happy. I can give my honest opinion. It's kind of a nice thing to be able to do. But you don't have to go out there and buy the best miniatures from Games Workshop. You can go to Reaper Miniatures, go to some of their Kickstarters where you spend about $150 to get probably about 200 miniatures. I've seen many of the Reaper's bonus Kickstarters which come out with tons and tons of miniatures, which are more than great enough to place in these tabletop games. Matter of fact, if you want to, you can go ahead and get some of these Reaper's miniatures box sets. Go out there and get some bases, glue the miniatures on those bases, and then you have the measurements you need to go ahead and play some of these tabletop games. So the cost of the miniatures is actually not true. You don't have to go out there and spend $50 for 5 miniatures from Games Workshop, or $40 for 3 or 4 miniatures if you are wanting to look at the game of Underworld. I love the game, but boy, oh boy, those prices really skyrocketed. But you can go out there and buy so many great miniatures for such a great price. And I'm going to cover another way to bring that price down just a little bit when we get to one of the later numbers in the series here. But I also want to cover the concept of terrain. Now here we actually have a really interesting one because terrain can be really expensive. Terrain can also be the dirtiest, cheapest, most dirtiest cheap. Most cheap is dirty. English, if I can't butcher at least one time per video, a video is just not complete. Oh well. So miniature terrain can be the least expensive cost for you if you want to do a little bit of work. Now there are absolutely a phenomenal and absolutely amazing amount of YouTube content creators out there who can teach you and show you how to create miniature tabletop terrain for dirt cheap prices. You can go ahead and check out MS Paint's an absolutely fantastic, another YouTube channel that I didn't recommend earlier because he seems to focus more on terrain, but I'm definitely going to mention MS Paint's right here because he does an absolutely phenomenal job of taking the most simplistic things you would consider trash in your household and turning it into phenomenal scenarios and scenery for your tabletop miniatures games. Matter of fact, he takes a whole bunch of pizza boxes and turns into terrain that I was like going, wow, that is some amazing terrain. All for the cost of pizza boxes. So after you invite your friends over for board game night, don't throw away those pizza boxes because you're going to use those for some tabletop terrain if you can check out that video. Really, really great job. But it's also easier to go out there and get some foam core. Take the foam core and start cutting it up and cut it into smaller pieces. Make sure you don't cut yourself, because razor blades and foam core, bad combination, so don't rush too much. But you can use this to go ahead and create some phenomenal terrain for your tabletop. Or if you just want to be super duper easy, go buy a box of Jenga, or Stacking Tower of the game, because I think Jenga might still be copyrighted. Paint up those wooden blocks, and guess what? Now you have some walls for your dungeon, or stack them in a row, and now you have your buildings. It is absolutely super duper cheap to create some terrain for your tabletop. All you gotta do is just be just a little bit creative. Number 5, restrictive player count. Now, restrictive player count is one thing that I do have a little bit of a challenge kind of protecting and defending when it comes to tabletop gaming, because this is one that is actually one of the biggest myths that is actually very true about tabletop gaming. The vast majority of tabletop games play as 2-player games, but if you're willing to go through the weeds and hunt down a little bit, you can actually break this myth down a little bit, but you have to do a little bit of your homework, and you also have to be willing to have friends who are willing to have games that might run a little bit longer. For example, most of your standard tabletop games are 2-player games where people fight a battle, end of the game, somebody's picked a winner. But you can go ahead and start looking at some of the campaign games which allow you to play multiple players. I'll throw out the game of Blood Bowl right here because Blood Bowl is an absolutely phenomenal game when it comes to campaign play. You get a whole bunch of friends together, each player picks a team, and then they're going to use their team to go in and play the game Blood Bowl, playing through this campaign game of a fantasy football series to pick the final Blood Bowl winning team. But that's not the only example. That's probably not even the best example for this video because there are other great games out there that allow you to play multiple players. Rangers of Shadow Deep actually allows you to play up to 4 players. Frostgrave allows you to play up to 6 players, and I think there actually might be a book that allows you to play 8 players. If I remember correctly, don't quote me on that one, but those are just some examples of some games that allow you to have a higher player count. So if you're willing to go out there and look and do a little bit of work, there are definitely games that allow you to play with a higher player count. your market is just going to start shrinking down a lot. But go out there and look for those games because they definitely do exist, and that breaks down that myth of the two-player games only. Number 6, measuring is required. Now this is another one of those myths that's a little bit harder to break, but it's also a myth that I can definitely break down very, very easily because it's not 100% accurate. Now, while the vast majority of tabletop games do require measuring, and this is where some people just don't enjoy the games. Nobody wants to pull out their rulers, start measuring across the table and go, okay, my guys can move here. And then you're going to have the other player across the tables and argue at you, say, no, that's an extra millimeter. How dare you? You've broken the game. Well, if you play with those people, maybe you shouldn't be playing with those kind of people. But I didn't want to digress too much. But I know it can be frustrating using measuring tapes. Now there's ways to get around that. There are actually plastic rulers which are designed for miniatures games, and I highly recommend them. They are much, much better than using actual measuring tapes while you're still learning the game. But I also tell you that those roll-up flexible kind of measuring tapes, like you get from like yarn companies and stuff like that, are actually beyond phenomenal when it comes to tabletop games, because since it's like a fabric type of material, you can actually bend them, which allows you to do movement more accurately around corners, around trees, and around buildings, which is something I actually enjoy. But the rulers can be absolutely fantastic. They do measurement very, very well and can also help simplify things. But there's also tabletop miniature games that actually play without measurement. We'll go ahead and throw out the game of Dead Zone right here, right now, which is a game that plays on an 8x8 grid. And your movement is based on this grid. You basically move from one grid to another grid, or if you have enough movement, you can move up to 2 grids. And when you move to the next grid, you place your miniatures anywhere in the grid that you move to, or the square that you move to, anywhere in that specific space that you want. And that simplifies the movement. It makes it so darn quick, so darn efficient, and so darn awesome. It's also a reason why I enjoy the game of Dead Zone so darn much. Dead Zone is a game that allows you to get to the tabletop and teach it to other players so easily because you don't have to do the minutia of measuring the movement. It's a simple, your unit has a movement of 1 square. So any square next to this one, they can go ahead and move into it. Pick up your miniatures, put them in the next square, align them however you want, and now I can go ahead and take my turn. It's something I really enjoy about Dead Zone quite a bit. There are other games that use this concept, though. There's also the games of Battletech, which use a hexagon grid. And there's also more games out there that actually allow you to do a hybridization of allowing you to either do full measured movement or doing movement across squares. Those games are out there. They're absolutely fantastic. And if measuring is something that really does give you a lot of heartburn, well, check out some of those other games because they could be a great way to start enjoying the tabletop gaming hobby itself. Myth number 7, and maybe also a solution, is going to be 3D printers themselves. Now, 3D printers, mark my words, are going to be the future of tabletop gaming. Now, I know there's a whole bunch of naysayers out there and say, 3D printers will never take over the world. To which I'm going to say, can you go hunt down your dot matrix printer that's still going bzzzt, 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 back and forth doing all your printing? Because I can guarantee you 3D printing is going to be the future of tabletop gaming. 3D printers are already, for a very reasonable price, about $250, producing miniatures that are very, very much tabletop quality and very much look good on the table. You go check out game companies such as Fat Dragon Games, which will throw out a Kickstarter for about $70, which will give you the STLs to print out an infinite army of miniatures, all for $70. All you gotta do is just pay for the plastic. 3D printers are definitely going to be the wave of the future. Matter of fact, I am willing to bet one person in the future is going to come out to Kickstarter with a great brainstorm. They may get it from watching this video because I'm sure as heck not going to take the effort of doing this. But what they're going to do is they're going to partner up with a company such as Fat Dragon Games. They're going to bring an idea for a game out there. Then they're going to partner up with Fat Dragon Games, which is going to produce all the STLs for the game. They're going to put that game on Kickstarter. It's probably be a dungeon crawler or something along those lines, or maybe a game such as Lego Dungeoneers, which is a game that almost already screamed for making up a game of this style. Basically what I'm saying is somebody's going to create a very well-designed game. And then they're also going to sell that game, partner up with the STL files, and the game is already going to be designed. So instead of going to Kickstarter, throwing your money at a company for like $250 in the hopes that in the next 2 to 3 years they're eventually going to ship you your game, no, one of these smart entrepreneurs are going to go to Kickstarter and they're going to have a game fully designed with all the artwork just need to be done based on how successful the Kickstarter is going to be done. And then they're going to have STL files. Again, the amount of STL files is going to be based on how successful that Kickstarter is going to be. on the total pledge levels. And then what they're going to do is they're going to put this Kickstarter out there. Kickstarter is going to last for a couple weeks, and at the end of the Kickstarter, they're going to collect their money. And then a month later, you're going to get the entire game given to you as a download link. And then you're going to go out there and print out the game. You're going to print out the STL files. And instead of waiting 3 years like everybody else does, you're going to print out the entire game for your tabletop and have this wonderful game. And oh yeah, it's going to cost less than $100 because you're not paying for shipping. You're not waiting for manufacturing. You're not dealing with delay costs and all these other things that cause all these problems for Kickstarter. And you're going to have an absolutely fantastic game. Now, I know you're going to sit there and balk at what I'm saying, but if you go back in my YouTube history when I did a full review of Evil High Priest from Peterson Games, many people actually accused me of getting a free copy of the game from Peterson Games. I didn't. If you go back to Peterson Games Kickstarter for Evil High Priest, during the Kickstarter, one of the updates gave a link saying, hey, if you want to back our game but you're not quite sure this will be a good game for you, download these STL files and all these printing files for a complete copy of the basic game without all the stretch goals. I did my entire video on that print download file and had multiple people actually accusing me of getting an actual copy of the game. I didn't. All I just used was my basic $200 printer, my basic 3D printer to make all the files to create a game that was absolutely phenomenal and looked like a full production retail copy of the game. And it never was. Somebody's going to take this, somebody's going to run with this idea, and we're no longer going to be waiting years and years for our games. We're going to get our games a couple months after. All we need is our regular printers, our 3D printers, and we can go to town. Now, this is the future that I foresee, but let's take this into the current time of what we have with 3D printers. Thanks to 3D printers, we can go ahead and get STL files for terrain, we can get STL files for miniatures, we get STL files for everything we ever need, and a lot of these STL files are extremely dirt cheap. Now, I've already mentioned Fat Dragon Games earlier, and again, they're not a sponsor of me. Matter of fact, I've emailed them in the past, and they've completely ignored my email, so they're actually like an anti-sponsor, because for some reason they don't seem to like me that well. Don't know why. I actually backed both their Kickstarters. Still ignored me. Oh well, moving on. So people are going to take companies like this, and they're going to take the cheapness of this, $50, and you get all the miniatures and all the terrain you need. Or if you really want to, you can even go to Thingiverse, where all you got to do is just toss somebody a tip. A small tip in a tip jar to help you get some STL files, and you get some beyond awesome terrain. I've managed to get some terrain from STL files on Thingiverse just with a small tip that I use in all my D&D games that are better than Kickstarters I spent like $150 or more with. Whoops. Okay, the wife didn't hear that. I don't want her to come down at me down and say, you spent how much on that plastic? No, she won't do that. She loves me dearly. But it's funny to say anyways. But there's games such as, there's Kickstarters for miniature components that are costing $150 plus shipping, and you wait maybe a year and a half to get those, and all you got to do is, instead of waiting for that time, use your 3D printer to go ahead and create these, save yourself time, save yourself some money, and also save yourself lots of heartbreak. It's an absolutely wonderful way to go, and I'm telling you, 3D printers are going to be the wave of the future when it comes to tabletop gaming itself. So I know there's a little bit of fear with 3D printers. I'm going to leave a couple links down below for some channels that can actually help you get started in a 3D printing space. Because while it may look intimidating, it is definitely not intimidating at all. And I mean quite literally, you can get fantastic tabletop quality miniatures for $250. And that's just using the STL files. I don't use resin printers because I don't like the toxicity of the resin itself. I have a family, I have pets, I have kids. There's no way resin printers come into my house. But those FDM printers are absolutely wonderful. They're enclosed. You don't really have to worry about fumes or anything like that because most of them are enclosed and most of them have filters built into them. And if you are concerned, just put it in the side of the house that's not used that much. But again, it's pretty darn easy. It's absolutely wonderful. And the things you can do with these 3D printers is absolutely phenomenal. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off-the-shelf board game reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those emails as quickly as I can. You can also support the channel on Patreon, patreon.com/otsbgr. Just $1 in the tip jar is a fantastic way to say thank you. This channel is 100% sponsor free. If you want to keep media honest and free, tossing $1 in tip jar is an awesome way to say thank you. If you enjoy this video, if you enjoy the content I put out there, click that like button, click that subscribe button. It's another great way to help keep the channel growing strong. Just click 2 buttons. That's all you got to do. Doesn't cost you anything except a little bit of time. Just click once, click twice, and that way you get some notifications when we put out some more additional videos. Also, go ahead and check out the next video in the series right over here. And as always, thanks for watching.